Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a Dungeons & Dragons player that turns his Dungeon Master's night into total crap, a story about a Dungeon Master that seems to hold a grudge, and more. But before we get into that, here is Nipsey with a special request.
I hope you press like on the video and subscribe. I really like this Alice.
I hope that they do that too, buddy. But with that said, it's story time. Drunk Player Covers the Bathroom in Poop After Dying in Game by Reddit user, the Mega Man TT. This story is somewhat bizarre because it really felt like it came out of nowhere. There were about 4 of us guys, and we were all friends to some degree. Some of us are closer to others, but we all enjoyed each other's company, went out for drinks, and played games together. Speaking of games, a couple months ago, we all decided to have a Dungeons & Dragons game at the DM's house, since it was the largest childless house in our group. His wife ended up playing too. For like 99% of the campaign, everything was good. Our characters were fun, the world was immersive, and the villains were tough. This was until about a month ago. We were having a Saturday get-together where we would basically just unwind with some beer, Dungeons & Dragons, and movies. The soon-to-be that guy was playing a wizard as the party entered an ancient cave/dungeon and reached a magic item at the end of the room. There was a chasm that was separating us from the item, and before we could get to it, the cave/dungeon started collapsing due to an evil spell that one of us had accidentally triggered. All of us decided that it wasn't worth risking a TPK over a suspicious magic item, as my Detect Good and Evil spell heavily implied that this magic item was evil. Well, all of us, except the soon-to-be that guy, who decided to waste his last spell slot by teleporting across the chasm to get the magic item with 4 HP left, because he was convinced that the DM was tricking us. Well, it turns out I was right, and it was a mimic. A talking mimic that was working for the BBEG. The mimic got a surprise round and missed, so Wizard decided to flee. Fortunately for him, the mimic failed the opportunity attack as well, so as the rubble was falling, Wizard attempts to jump and grab a stalactite, so the Dungeon Master had him roll an athletics check. And he rolled a nat 1. So the stalactite falls into the abyss, along with Wizard, which obviously kills him. Wizard then says, "No death saves?" in a confrontational tone. So the Dungeon Master says, "Bro, you rolled a nat 1 and fell into an abyss that leads to the Underdark at 4 HP. You can't death save your way out of that." Wizard then claims that the Dungeon Master just made up the whole Underdark chasm in order to kill him, and accuses Dungeon Master of having a, quote, DM versus the party mentality. He then drunkenly tried to calculate the max height that a chasm like that could be, and that he couldn't have taken enough damage to negate death saves. His math was painfully bad, and his premise was flawed as, again, he fell into the effing Underdark, not a regular cave floor. And then, he tried to argue that if he has to die, that he should be able to come back as a more powerful white wizard, like Gandalf, because the wizard class is based on Lord of the Rings wizards. As his arguments kept failing, and he was getting angrier and more argumentative, the DM basically just laid down the law, and basically said, "Look, your character is dead. End of discussion. So, roll up a new one." He then just sat down and said, "Fine," as he sat there pouting and slowly coming up with a new character, as the rest of us dodged the collapsing rubble and rocks, and barely escaping the caves with our lives. The former wizard didn't get a chance to finish the character before the session ended. As we talked a bit after the session about how wild it was and anticipated next week's game, he just kept sitting there, silently pouting, before he got up to go use the bathroom. We kept talking and drinking our beers as the subject veered off into anime and other nerdy topics. We chilled for about 20 minutes before we saw him coming out of the bathroom, Then he opens the door to leave the house. Our dungeon master asks if he's okay, and he just abruptly says, "I'm fine, my Uber's here, bye," and slammed the door. We just figure he needs some time to cool off, and our DM said that he would talk to him tomorrow. We continued on just having fun for the next 10 minutes before we started getting ready for the movies. As the dungeon master and his wife were preparing the popcorn, we, the players, started noticing a really bad smell coming from the bathroom. We ignored it till it got to the point where DM's wife noticed it and complained. So our dungeon master checked it out and started yelling and cursing. We all get up and check it out, and it is honestly the most disgusting thing I have ever experienced in my life. Poop was smeared all over the floor, the walls, and the mirror. There was a turd in the sink, and it looked like he wrote the words "F you" in poop that he clearly smeared on the wall. Although, to be fair, the writing was not very clear, obviously. We were all shocked, and Dungeon Master and his wife were pissed. Dungeon Master called the former wizard to basically cuss him out and to say that he is no longer welcome at his table or in his house. He had tears in his eyes while making this call, as the rest of us basically just began grabbing cleaning supplies to help him clean up the bathroom. It was gross, but we got it cleaned in about a half an hour. We all took showers afterwards, and by then, we ended up still watching the movies in order to not let this be our memory of what was otherwise a great night. Plus, we were all still a bit buzzed and didn't want to drive. The next day, the former wizard called me to ask me to talk to the DM and get him to let him play again, but I refused and told him that he really hurt DM. So he tried to make me out to be a shitty friend and whatnot. So I shut his manipulative BS down and said, "Fine, then I guess we have no reason to talk to each other, if that's how you feel," and I hung up. None of us have heard from him again. TLDR: a drunk player gets angry when his wizard dies after making a risky move to get a magic item. He decides to get revenge by shitting on the DM's bathroom floor, smearing it on the walls, and taking a dump in the sink. He was subsequently banished from DM's house. Well, that has to be one of the most disgusting stories that I have read on this channel. It sounds to me like Wizard may have just got a bit way too drunk, and took the death of his character as some sort of personal slight against him. And one would think that he'd have to be pretty plastered to think that painting the bathroom with his own doo-doo was a good idea. Though, at least he had the right state of mind to call an Uber instead of driving at least. Good on OP and the rest of their friends for helping to clean up the mess that Wizard left behind, because I know I wouldn't be able to, as my gag reflex is pretty sensitive. But then for a Wizard to call OP a shitty friend for not convincing the DM to let him come back is pretty ironic. At least it sounds like that whole ordeal didn't prevent the group from enjoying the rest of the night though. Let's move on. But before we do, this following story was submitted to the D&D Doge subreddit, so if you have a story that you would like to be read on the channel, be sure to add your submission, and who knows, you may just see it in a video. But with that said, let's get into it. Yeah, I've got lots of experience. By Reddit user, TheLoreMaster22. Hey there Doge, long-time listener, first-time poster. You and Den of the Drake are my favorite D&D horror story YouTubers. Oh wow, thank you. That is a huge compliment. Okay, so here's the cast of our story. Myself, a cowboy-themed warlock. Yeehaw lock, you are missed. My usual Dungeon Master, playing an artificer. The Dungeon Master, and the Dungeon Master's brother, who was playing the cleric rogue combo that the Dungeon Master handed him, dubbed Holy Roger from now on. So DM's dad and my dad met, and they found out both their sons liked Dungeons & Dragons, and DM was looking for a group. We tried him out in our usual group, but it didn't mesh, so Artificer and I decided to play in Dungeon Master's homebrew campaign. He and I are longtime players, and longtime DMs, so we were excited to play, because the DM said that he had a lot of experience too, and had a great game planned. So the first session rolls around, we've got our characters, and we're ready to go. DM shows off his minis and props, then tells us about the world, and we're excited to play. He wants us to lend our experience and knowledge as well. The game starts off okay. The world is interesting, DM has good ideas, and we start off strong, snagging a small airship from a big boss after a pretty hard fight. However, things start to get a little weird even then. I roll a 1 on my roll with Eldritch Blast, and the DM decides that my character now has a tentacle hand. I state that I don't like having my character changed without my consent, and he blows it off as done. Whatever, it's not a huge deal, but I don't like being told that I'm just stuck with a tentacle now. The next thing Artificer and I notice is that the DM is rolling a d20 for damage, for a dagger. He was convinced that this was the correct die, and this was only the start of the madness. Something to be noted about Artificer and I. We really know our stuff, due to our long time playing and DMing. We know the rules very well, and we understand 5th edition very deeply. We can make really strong characters, and we know how to use them. Our out-of-the-box thinking threw the DM for a loop, and after the first session, Artificer and I had a talk, as we realized that DM did not know how to handle us, and the combos we could pull off with each other. We also started to notice a lot of railroading and rockfall moments, things that we were simply told were happening and we could do nothing about it. Over the next few sessions, Artificer noticed that DM really didn't seem to like me in particular. When I had an idea, established information would change to prevent me from carrying out my idea. Lore would suddenly be introduced, like, "Oh, I just forgot to tell you this." Items I wanted would be presented, then taken away. There seemed to be actual opposition to just about everything I tried to do, and the DM even refused to actually say my name. He just pointed and said, "You." DM would even present choices to my character, then make it so only one choice was viable, then put in things that screwed up that option for me. The DM forced my character to go through a drug trip just for putting cucumber slices on his eyes in a bathhouse, and refused to stop ramping up the trip, continuing for several minutes, despite Artificer and I telling him to stop, that it wasn't funny. He would even take great rolls and make them useless. For example, I got a nat 20 on an investigation roll, and he gave me nat 5 information. He would interrupt our roleplay, punish us for not doing what he wanted, and at one point, even ignored any rolls we made, despite telling us to make them, and forcing situations that he wanted. A little railroad is needed, but this man had us riding for days. All in all, it was an interesting world that had potential. Unfortunately, I firmly believe that the DM had an attitude of trying to, quote, win D&D. I think he didn't like that Artificer and I would call him out if we saw something problematic, which we were asked to do, by the way. I still don't know what particular issue he had with me, whether he thought my character was too strong, or he didn't like my roleplay, or whatever it was. All I know is, we did what he asked. We gave our knowledge and experience to help him. We weren't rude or condescending when we called him out on stuff. We just wanted a fair game, and man was pulling too many shenanigans. Honestly, poor Holy Roger. I'm pretty sure he didn't want to be there. We tried to make the game work, but it did fall apart eventually after a few months. Honestly, I still don't know what was up with the DM, and I didn't want the game to fall apart. Thankfully, our current game is going great. Artificer is the DM. We have a great party with amazing roleplay, and I'm playing one of the best characters I've ever made. I love him. Now, Artificer's mom is running Lost Mines for us, and it's a lot of fun. D&D is one of my favorite games, and I look forward to many great campaigns in the future. TLDR, DM had a DM versus player mentality. a poor grasp on the rules, and had a particular hatred for my Yeehaw, even changing rules and lore to stop his plans. Yeah, from what I gather from the story, there was definitely some shenanigans afoot. And unlike the previous story, this one does seem to have some DM versus player instances. Like turning OP's character's arm into a tentacle for rolling a nat 1 on Eldritch Blast. Now, I can understand some sort of crit fails, like maybe the blast misfiring and hitting a teammate or yourself, not something akin to a permanent injury. Not to mention the clear passive-aggressive way that the DM referred to OP simply as you. It's no wonder that that game eventually fell apart, but at least it sounds like OP is still having fun with D&D with different games and different DMs. Let's move on to the next one. DM will not let player even have a defense on a misread situation. By Reddit user Nezchurian1IR. To preface, this just happened today, and I do not care if the DM is on here. I'll call myself player and him hardhead DM. This guy is a great DM, but he clearly has some issues with matters of how he runs his games and listening. So I just left, or got booted, from a Discord Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition game. Mind you, it was in private, luckily, with the DM. However, he pushed me to a point that I snapped on him and told him that he needed to listen and stop talking down to me. So he started off by saying that I had to have all of my math done for stuff before my turn, and I am pretty fast on calculations of basic math in my head. My boss relies on me for quick calculating on the job as a general contractor. So I told him the honest answer from my point of view and explained that I am doing it, but I somehow, because of his opinion, got rebuffed that I was still too slow. From here, oh boy, it snowballed. This is pretty fresh, but I will admit that I'm still frazzled about it, so details will be on point as I can remember them. The next point he brought up was the fact that I was going to let another player handle a situation. My character was stuck in a web, and this player was free. I thought the player had a plan, so I was going to let him do this. It seems letting another player shine in a bad spot was me checking out. So again, when I explained my end, he declared that I was debating him and giving him crap. So finally, I told him that I do not like people talking down to me, as well as calling me a liar, or not even bothering to let me say anything in defense without telling me that I am wrong or fighting with him. This carried over on a series of topics, and I was staying calm as ever until the very end, when it was clear that he would not let me explain anything within reason. He kept accusing me of debating the matter, giving him crap, and fighting him, even when I explained to him that this situation has happened a lot in the past, and that it really bothers me in a polite manner. When I DM, if a player has a legitimate issue, I will at least talk it out and hear them out. This is not what he did. He was iron-fisted and unforgiving. He did not even care about that, and I've been playing tabletop RPGs for 31 years, and him 33 years. However, even if asked for some consideration of things, he'd refuse, and kept claiming that I was in the wrong. Yes, a previous session, I had been having severe sleep issues, and the exhaustion in my voice he took as disrespect, and we talked about it, so I thought it was done. Yeah, fat chance he was done with issues. And after my patience ran out, I told him that if he was going to keep up like this, that I would quit. Well, true to my word, I gave him his third and final chance, as I am a fair person and I will give people chances. He blew it though, and got even worse. So I finally snapped at him and told him that he was being an unreasonable a-hole, and that I was quitting because he was not willing to accept any reasonable defense or explanation. I then left the server and blocked him on Discord. I did use caps in the final sentence as he had me that frustrated, but in the entire conversation, I was pushed against the wall and kept on the back heel. Now, I can understand getting annoyed a bit if a player is taking a little too long on their turn, but to state that they need to have all of their math and turn done before their turn is even up is a bit overkill. I know there have been plenty of times where I had a set plan for my turn, but something happens that blows that plan apart, and I have to think up of a new one quick. Not to mention that my sneak attack now involves 7d6 for my rogue, and with 3 nat 20s in our last fight, that took me some time to calculate. For some reason, this Dungeon Master just seems so adversarial to OP, that I think he probably just didn't like him for some reason, and that is why they would constantly clash heads. So I think it was maybe for the best for OP to jump ship on this game. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.